So every year around this time, we have this debate. Should players be skipping bowl games in college football? My answer, not a big deal. Pete Mundo, Heartland College Sports Weekly, part of heartlandcollegesports.com. Thanks so much for joining us and being a part of the show. So Will Grier is the big name in the Big 12 who announced he's skipping the bowl game. West Virginia quarterback says, you know what? I'm not going to play in the Camping World Bowl. I'm going to prepare for the NFL draft. And I say, fine. I'm not somebody who is a fan of paying college football players because most of them are not worth the $100,000 to $200,000 that they get in tuition, in training, in tutors, in food, and all this stuff. Most of them aren't worth it. Yeah, Tim Tebow's worth it. Johnny Manziel's worth it. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, they're all worth it many times over. The average run-of-the-mill college football player isn't worth it, and he takes more out of the system than he gives in. That's a fact. So I'm not a fan of paying college football players. It's also just an incredibly slippery slope that is a ticking time bomb if you go down that road. But at the same time, if a guy has given his, blood, sweat, and tears to a program, to a team, and then you're going to play in the Camping World Bowl in Orlando against Syracuse, I'm not going to give you a hard time if you say, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to continue this whole thing. I'm not going to keep putting myself on the line in a meaningless bowl game. I'm not going to do it. The only thing I would ask as a fan is that if you're a Will Grier, just like he did, let us know as soon as you can that you're not going to play. That's the right thing to do because let's say you're a West Virginia fan. You're a father, you and your son, you want to make a trip of it, go to Orlando, and you think you're seeing Will Grier, you buy the tickets, you book the airfare, and then he announces, 3 days before, oh, by the way, I'm not playing. That'd be a classless move. But that's not what Will Grier is doing, and that's not what most of these guys who don't play in their bowl games end up doing. They'll announce it pretty quickly, just like Will Grier did, and say, listen, I'm not going to play in the game. Then you can determine whether or not it's worth it for you and your friends or your family or whoever to go down to Orlando and to participate in the bowl game. Now, I don't think this is going to be a widely attended game. I know it's actually on paper a pretty good game. Syracuse it's a Northeast school, obviously, a lot of New Yorkers, but also where do New Yorkers end up? They typically end up in Florida. So you could get a good Syracuse crowd because they've had their best season in a long time. West Virginia recruits heavily in Florida, also a good situation for them. I'm not sure if there's a massive alumni base in Florida, but it's two old Big East foes. It's an intriguing matchup. West Virginia can't do any worse than it did in that Heart of Dallas Bowl last year. I mean, what a disaster and a disgrace that game was on every level, from the game itself to the fan attendance. That was embarrassing, to say the least. So I'm not going to get on Will Grier here. I'm not going to do it. He's paid his dues. Team came up short. Yeah, he had a couple of mistakes in the OU game. Would love to have those back, but it's okay. Guys got to prepare for the NFL. I'd probably do the same thing. But it's disappointing as a fan because you obviously want to see what Will Grier could do against a very good ACC team, and it could end up skewing the bowl results a little bit. If West Virginia loses the game, what would have happened if Will Grier would have played? We don't know. By the way, Shawn Robinson, TCU quarterback, announced that he was going to transfer. This surprised me. I vividly remember before the season when I was at Big 12 Media Days down in Dallas, and Gary Patterson brought Shawn Robinson. Every coach brings 3-4 players, sometimes 5 players, to participate in Big 12 Media Days. And Shawn Robinson was there. Guy was a true sophomore. He only played in a couple of games last year as a true freshman. He was going to be the starter heading into the season. And Gary Patterson said, I usually don't bring really young guys like this, but this kid's got a certain maturity to him that I like. He's a leader. I trust him. I respect him. And that's why I brought him down to Big 12 Media Days. And I said, dang, they must also have a great relationship. I don't know what happened, but it clearly appears like that relationship is not what it used to be. To put it politely, it's not. This caught me really off guard. Now, Robinson didn't have a great year. He got hurt, of course, dealt with some injuries, started the first 7 games, completed 61% of his passes, 1,300 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He struggled with turnovers. That is something that will get you burnt by Gary Patterson. He always looks at it and says, my defense is good. I just need an offense that can do enough, that won't try to do too much. Kenny Hill had that problem early in his career at Texas A&M and then early on in his tenure at TCU. Once he settled down and just said, you know what, I just got to do enough. Well, this team got itself to a Big 12 championship game last year. So I don't know if it was the turnovers that ultimately got to Patterson, what would have happened, but still Robinson, if this was a year of growing pains, he still could have very much been the starter next season. Michael Collins is the sophomore who took over, a transfer from Penn. He was okay. He ended up getting injured too. He was all right. He completed 56% of his passes. He helped the team down the stretch a little bit, but he wasn't lights out. It's not like I'm sitting here as a TCU fan and saying, I can't wait for Michael Collins to be quarterback in this team next year. I wouldn't be saying that if I'm a Horned Frogs fan. Of course, what you do have is Justin Rogers, former 5-star prospect. He redshirted this season because he was still dealing with a knee injury suffered in high school. But I don't know what to make of that. These 5-star guys coming out of high school, if he's that reliant on his legs, suffered a knee injury in high school, there is so much speculation going on there. So there's a lot up in the air. I don't know if TCU is going to try to go the grad transfer route and see if there's somebody out there who wants to transfer in that's eligible right away in 2019. I would not be shocked if Gary Patterson looked for one of those guys. Not saying it can't be Justin Rogers, but somebody to compete with him and Michael Collins. Michael Collins was serviceable, but am I going to say the Horned Frogs are going to get themselves back to the top of the Big 12 Conference on the right arm of Michael Collins? Not based off of what I saw, that's for sure. So this is a team and a program in a little bit of state of flux right now, especially at the most important position on the field. What are they doing at quarterback in 2019? This was a year for TCU to kind of reset. They lost 20-plus seniors off of last year's team. But now you say, okay, you don't want 2 of those years in a row where you're going 6-6. 1 year you can take it. They end up getting to the bowl game. These 3 weeks of practice going to be huge for a young group of guys. But, you go 6-6, 2-3 years in a row, all of a sudden that momentum you had from the Big 12 championship appearance in 2017 could be wearing off. Well, Pete Mundo, Heartland College Sports Weekly, part of HeartlandCollegeSports.com. Thanks so much for joining us, being a part of this week's show. We'll talk to you next week, same time, same place on Heartland College Sports Weekly. All right, YouTube, you guys are the best. Rate, review, subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got more video coming your way, and we'll talk to you soon.